sometimes you just ask around.
Yeah.
In the community, and you figure out what's going on.
And again,
and
yeah,
maybe, I mean, if L, to mention names, if L is level 3 and M is probably another large show with M, whatever, Celia or so, they unlikely peer with B, so you know it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point too. Some of the information that you glean by participating in events like this are these types of relationships, who's pairing with whom, what de-pairing has gone on and why, and that kind of stuff. Another one, or actually, before I go on, this traffic manipulation tactic, how many people think this is unethical? 1? 2? Well, why do you think it's unethical? Either one. Some people think it is unethical because it's what? It's manipulating the market.
You're taking advantage of the person, of M.
Yeah, and there is some amount of deceit going on. Other ISPs would say, this is just clever traffic manipulation. This is what ISPs do. In some cases, traffic will actually traverse oceans in order for an ISP to meet the peering ratio requirements of one of its peers. If they're on that hairy edge of, I can't exceed more than 2 to 1 to keep my peering with you, and I'm at like 2, maybe 2.1, I might force some part of my traffic along a much more circuitous route in order to maintain that pairing with you, because I really value that. And this isn't too much different, they would argue. This is manipulation for another purpose. Yeah?
If I can make an addition. Before you start manipulating traffic, you ask nicely B. And if they turn you down, I mean, why should it be unethical? And the goal is to serve your customer, the customers of A, as good as possible with the traffic. So if you have to reroute traffic for capacity reasons or whatever, then it's not unethical.
The peering guys said, no, you do not ask for peering because that would tip your hand. You know, if you do this maneuver but you asked them for peering a month ago and then all of a sudden the traffic spiked and then you go say, hey, we have a lot of traffic, that seems a little fishy. Yeah.
So what happens when M figures it out?
Well, this is part of the danger. The peering coordinator community is a pretty tight-knit group. They are paid. Their job in life is to talk to each other. And if it does get found out, then a lot more people will recognize what's gone on.
So this is why I personally thought it wasn't ethical, because, I mean, you could work it out with them. If the case was, you know, better routing and better saving your customers, then you can work it out with them. But if you're deceiving them and then figure it out, it will make you look bad.
Yeah. There's also a lot of religion. You know, that the content guys believe that they ought to be getting paid for their content. And it seems rather odd to them that they would need to pay somebody to deliver content to somebody who requested their content. I mean, these get very, very religious and very emotional. Okay, let me move on. Another tactic that came up when I asked the peering coordinators, how do you get peering where you otherwise would not be able to get peering? And then this one, I think, is highly unethical. None of these am I recommending. I'm just telling you what I learned in the field. This one is bluffing issues. So in this scenario, ISP A says to ISP B, are you seeing a lot of packet loss from my customers? I'm seeing an enormous amount of packet loss. And they may even have some fictitious trace routes, fictitious pings that show that every 12 packets are getting dropped. And they say, you know you don't like your transit provider. I don't like my transit provider either. And I know both of our customers are going to complain. I bet we're both going to be a whole lot better if we solve this packet loss and high jitter and terrible latency problem by pairing with each other. So this is a bluff issues tactic. The other form of this tactic came up, and for some reason it's always Microsoft that's being used. ISP A says, we have a big customer coming online. I can't say its name. It's highly confidential, but they do these operating system updates once every couple of months. And they're coming online, and I'm telling you, we better upgrade these pipes with us, and they better be peering relationships. Maybe we should open up 4 or 5 additional exchange point interconnects, because this fictitious traffic is coming very soon, and you won't have time to scramble. So bluffing these issues is one of the tactics that has effectively gotten peering. And I'm going to skip ahead to just 2 more tactics. How do you become a Tier 1 ISP? Well, one mechanism is you acquire a Tier 1 ISP. And I'll tell you the Telstra story. The ACCC is a regulatory agency in Australia, and they were getting a lot of political pressure for Telstra, the incumbent telco. I mean, this is the 800-pound gorilla in Australia. They were getting pressure to force Telstra to peer. And, you know, my view of government and regulators is that they generally want to do the right thing. You know, they want to see the right outcome happen. So they applied pressure on Telstra to make Telstra peer with the 3 largest Tier 2 ISPs that have been pushing Telstra also to peer. So Telstra went ahead and peered with Optus, Connect.com, and Aussiemail. And the idea was then all of those networks could sell inexpensive access to the internet to all the customers across Australia, where the price was very, very high. What actually happened, though, is as soon as Telstra peered with Optus, Connect.com, and Aussiemail, foreign ISPs swept in and purchased those companies for their free peering with Telstra, the 800-pound gorilla in Australia. So they acquired those companies so they would have free access to all those Australian routes. So, you know, the government wanted to do the right thing and get inexpensive access, but in effect, what happened was they just gave inexpensive access to foreign competitors. But that is one of the mechanisms of getting access. This one's the funniest one. The European guys I spoke with said that the NOC operators that have read the playbook have actually referred to this one by number. Like the NOC would say, "Yeah, Tom, we got another 19 last night. I can't believe they're still trying this one." This is the fake NOC outage. So what ISP-A would do is they would recognize that ISP-B does their configuration runs on their routers every night from between 3 and 4 in the morning. And that's when you typically have your least experienced network operators on staff. These are the guys who you've just trained, and it's the duty that they have to do. They've got to work the midnight shift. They don't know a whole lot, but they also don't want to get in trouble, so they're a little bit nervous. So you call them up at 3 in the morning and you say, "Guys, this is the 15th time that this has happened. My peering session has gone down. Don't make me call Hans Werner Brown at home again. You better set it up. I know you guys are doing this configuration run." And the poor NOC operator says, "Yeah, I just modified the script. I hope that didn't cause the problem." And you just keep on pressuring him to turn up that peering session and make sure this doesn't happen again. This actually has worked. And when I present this in forums, what they typically say is, "Oh my goodness, I wonder what our network operations center would do." And it's interesting, but by definition, this has led to peering. Okay. And then the last one is leveraging broader business relationships. And this has happened a lot. If you can't get peering through simply asking for it, you can come up with a broader business relationship whereby peering can be obtained. The most recent example in the news was Comcast. Comcast had a complex business relationship whereby they would buy fiber, they would buy, I don't know, co-location space or what have you, and they would buy transit from level 3 in exchange for having a free and reciprocal free peering relationship. So as part of a broader business deal, part of that deal was having free peering. It's very effective if you have the money to purchase that type of volume. Then again, you've got your internal advocate to help you. Back in the early days, the same maneuver was done by AOL. AOL wanted free peering with level 3, and level 3 provided millions of dollars worth of dial-in modems. So they said to level 3, you know, we're going to put that request up for tender, so there'll be some competition, but you know what, if you peer with us, maybe we'll just renew that dial-in modem pool arrangement again. And again, that's the leverage that some of the larger volume companies have. So in summary, these are some of the tricks of the trade that some of the most clever peering coordinators shared with me for ways to obtain peering where you otherwise would not be able to get peering. Again, I'm not recommending these. I'm just a researcher saying these are some of the things that I've seen in the field. And all the tactics are on the Dr. website, Dr. Peering website for free. They're also in the book if you happen to have the book. And this is the one slide that I like to bring up since my European friends are here. These are the top ways that European exchange points are different from the U.S. exchange points. In Europe, the exchange points are typically not-for-profit associations, where in the U.S., they're typically commercial corporations. In European IXs, you have members. You know, it's kind of like you own part of it. Or in the U.S., you have customers. These are people who pay, people that you want to give really good service to because otherwise they will move out and not pay you as much anymore. In both cases, they run the best quality switches. In European, the exchange points are co-location neutral. That means you can go into different co-location providers to get access to the European switches. Where in the US, the co-location operator is also the one who runs the switch. And if you don't like the co-location company, there's no other way typically to get access to their switch. So they are not co-location neutral. In the European IXs, you have member meetings, and there's voting. Some people used to liken the links to a golf club where you had to vote people in. Where in the US, if you've got money, you're in. Come on in. Lots of space. There are typically fixed contracts and fees. All ISPs are treated equally in the European exchange points, where in the US, there's a great deal more flexibility. If there are companies you really want to bring into your exchange point in the US, you can give them lower prices. You can lure them in. You have a great deal of flexibility, where in Europe, the ISPs are treated generally equally. They're all members. In Europe, generally speaking, the price of peering services is much lower than in the US. They have, as a not-for-profit, an incentive not to make too much money. They could possibly lose their association status. Where in the US, they're commercial companies, and they're driving to maximize profit. So different motivations. And then in both cases, they generally will have a 24/7 on-call type of solution. The operations support is generally pretty similar. Anyway, from conversations last night, I thought that might be a useful perspective. And with that, thank you very much for your time. We may have some time for questions. I don't know. Thanks.
We have about a minute for questions. I guess you asked a lot of questions during the session. One hand went up there. I'll take that, and I guess that will be it for this.
I have a question on the model of IXPs. What is the Asian type? And I'm sure if I ask you what is the best model, it will be the US model. But what is the Asian type so far?
Thank you for that question. Asian model is more similar to the European model. And you might be surprised, I really like the European model exchanges. You know, one thing I didn't say is that the Europeans are very sharing of information. They compare notes. They are free with their information flow. They don't have the corporate protection of proprietary information types of issues that commercial companies do. Commercial companies can't say that they've brought on these big customers and they have these big upgrades, because that's public information that has to be released in a proper way. And corporate IXs don't like the other corporate IXs. They compete with them. Where the IXs in Europe, they share information, and I think they kind of like each other. I think it's a good community. So I kind of like the European model a little bit more than the US commercial model in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add something to that one, because we connect to about 44 exchanges, and we connect in Asia as well as Europe as well as the US, so we've got a fair amount of experience. The one downside about Asia, blindingly expensive. I mean, just fundamentally far more expensive than anything in the US or anything in Europe. That just comes with the territory. It's also probably about the most expensive co-location facilities that we're in anywhere in the world. But to hit the point, Bill's right. There's a real plus to the European model of the membership-based model, because you actually feel like you have a say. Now, you have a say in a commercial model by walking away or negotiating a better contract. That works. It takes a little bit more effort. But in the big scheme of things, I have to honestly admit that from our experience of small and large member organizations, we think we get a better deal, because there are many members who are willing to put their time into making sure that the organization operates. And I don't just mean technically operates, but operates as an administration as well. So if you're thinking about how to set up an IX, take a look. Bill made the comment. The Europeans are very open. There's a lot of good information there. And if you're thinking about starting up an IX, look at the European model and the membership model and see why it actually works as well as it does. But, we're pretty happy. And as I said, we've got the gamut of all types, big, small, expensive, not expensive.
There's one other point I forgot to mention, and this is actually very important, I think, as Africa starts looking at its interconnect solutions. If you look at in Japan, their market, they have one exchange point called the JPIX, and it's owned by an ISP called KDDI. In the early days, the exchange points were owned by carriers, and we've migrated away from that to carrier-neutral models. Well, the JPIX is still owned by KDDI, and one of the cautionary tales that was told to me was one of the customers of the JPIX put in a request for a cross-connect to another ISP. That has to get approved by KDDI. KDDI took a look at what the impact would be on KDDI and said, this is not a cross-connect we will allow. The other story is Turkey. I spoke with one of the guys from the Turkish internet community, and he said that there are really 3 ISPs that dominate Turkey. And the 3 of them said, all of our traffic is going back to the US before it comes back to our customers. We should establish a peering point. One of them said, I volunteer, I have some data center space, and I would love to offer you guys free data center space, and we'll just peer across a switch that I own. I'll buy it. Just come on in. The other 2 built in. The Turkish internet performance got much, much better. And the ISP that owned that co-location center started telling the world, we are the Turkish topological core. And they leveraged their position by owning that switch fabric in the marketplace, and that helped them grow their market share at the expense of the people who decided to build in. So a cautionary tale, you really want to have a carrier-neutral and ISP-neutral exchange facility to avoid that type of conflict.